Hi everyone. In today's video we're going to review a playbook that will allow you to perform automatic response to the activity from infrequent country alerts in Cloud App Security. Here you have an example of such alert in Cloud App Security, and an easy way to perform investigation on such alert is to verify if the user is actually traveling to this country by verifying with the manager if the user is traveling, or by checking, for example, the out-of-office status of that user. Instead of doing this manually, what we're going to do is review a playbook that will allow you to perform this automatically. Let's move to the next component and how we can install such workflow. What we'll need to do is create first a specific resource group in your Azure environment. This is a logic app that's going to allow us to perform such operation, and we're going to use a script to deploy the different components that we need in order to use this playbook. Here is the script that you will find in the GitHub repository, and you can see here that we're going to deploy to the template infrequent country triage.template.json using a parameter file. This parameter file must contain specific information like the Cloud App Security API token that you will generate. You will find the details on how to generate one in our documentation, the tenant URL, your Cloud App Security tenant, the service principal name, so an application that you will register in Cloud App Security and to which you will provide the relevant permission in order to perform the API calls that will get the different information that we need in the workflow, the client ID and the client secret. So with all that information, you just have to update this parameter file and execute the command. Before doing so, I just want to show you that this ARM template is going to deploy two resources. First, a web connection. This web connection is the connection for Azure Sentinel. So we're going to create a playbook that can be used in Azure Sentinel and the actual logic app. Let's execute the deployment script and let's see how it works. You can see here the validation of our templates, and if everything works fine, in a few seconds we will have a new logic app available in our Azure environment. Now it's done, and you can see that as an output I'm sending the callback URL that you can use if we want to simulate the execution in Sentinel with a tool like Postman. This is how we're going to simulate the alert and execute the workflow in an automatic way. Let's move now to the Azure portal and see if our resources are available. Let's refresh this location, and you can see that we have two resources that have been created. The first resource is the Azure Sentinel connection, and you can verify here the status, and you can see that this is currently unauthenticated. What you have to do is to click on Edit API Connection and grant access to this connection to your environment. So I click on Authorize. I'm prompted to validate my credentials and click on the Save button. And if I go back now to the overview page, you can see that the status is now connected. So we've completed the first part of the deployment. Let's go back to the resource group and let's review the logic app that we deployed. As you can see, it's currently disabled, so we need to enable it if you want to use it. And I'm going to guide you through the different components of this logic app. As you can see here, the trigger is an Azure Sentinel run that will be executed. And what I'm going to do after that is saving the entities object into an array called entities. I'm doing this to be able to use the entities component as an array. And after that, I will have a few scopes that's going to perform different operations. The first scope here is going to extract the username from the alert in Sentinel by extracting the username from the account entities. It's going to compose the UPN by getting the UPN suffix and the username. And I'm doing also to extract an extraction here to get the alert ID that I will have here with that specific function. With that, I'm able to go to the next step with my UPN and the Cloud App Security Alert ID. In my user scope, you can see here that I'm going to call the graph endpoint for my users, and the goal here is to obtain details on the specific user that was impacted by this alert. What I'm doing next, based on the return code, so if the call was successful, I'm going to parse the user detail. I'm going to get the user manager by calling the manager endpoint in graph. I'm going to parse this information, and I'm going to also get the Azure AD identity protection risk status by calling the risky user endpoint for a specific object. That information will be reused a bit further in our investigation. The next thing that I'm doing is checking the user out of office status by calling the getMailTips endpoint based on the user information that we obtained before. And based on that information, I will be able to decide if I want to resolve automatically or not my alert. The next scope is based on group membership. And here I have a variable that you can update where I'm providing the different group IDs that I want to exclude for automatic remediation. Those are the group object IDs that you can find in Azure AD, and this is something that you can populate with more than 2 elements if you want to exclude automatic remediation for a specific group of users, like for example administrators or VIPs. And not having anyone defined here, of course, will automatically resolve the alert without any group exceptions. I'm then executing another call against Microsoft Graph, this time to check the group membership. And what this API calls does is that when you pass here in the body all the different groups that you want to check, it's going to return back in the answer the groups that are matching the membership for your user. So if you're passing, for example, 3 group object IDs, and in return you have zero group ID available in the body of your answer, it means that the user is not a member of that group. The next thing that I'm doing then is composing a message. And this message is a message that I will use when I will update my incident in Sentinel. And in here, I'm providing details about the out-of-office status, the out-of-office message. I'm also providing the details about the user principal name and the Azure AD identity risk level. Next come the condition, and in here, I'm going to perform 3 verifications to decide if I want to automatically resolve the alert or not. The first thing that I'm looking at is verifying if the out-of-office message is empty or not. This is why you can see here that this function starts with empty, and you can see that here is equals to false is used to decide if my condition is true or not, meaning that if the user out-of-office message is not empty, it means that the out-of-office status is on. I'm then checking if the group membership is empty or not. If it's empty, it means that the user is not a member of any of the exception group that we defined before. And the third condition is looking at the risk level in Azure AD Identity Protection. And in this case, I decided to verify that the risk level must not be equal to high. So if the user has a low or medium risk level status, it means that we're going to automatically resolve. It's not going to prevent us to automatically resolve the alert. If those 3 conditions are true, I'm performing 3 actions. The first action is calling Cloud App Security by using the token that we defined in the parameters and using the alert ID that we extracted before. And what I'm doing here is resolving the alert, and I define a resolution message here. The next thing that I do is changing the incident status in Sentinel, and you can see here that I'm closing this alert. I define the closing reason as a false positive, and I provide the message that we created before as the close reason text. I'm also adding an incident, and in this incident I'm also adding the messages that we had before. If those three conditions are false, instead of resolving the alert in Sentinel and in Cloud App Security, what I'm doing is that I'm just adding an incident comment in Sentinel with the message that we had before. The idea here is to provide to the security analyst some details like the risk level for the user and the out-of-office status and the out-of-office message, so the user can take the right decision if, for example, that user meets those criteria, but the group membership prevents us to automatically close the alert. This is the end of the presentation. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually execute this workflow by simulating an alert trigger that will trigger this workflow from Azure Sentinel. To do so, I'm going to use Postman, and within Postman, I'm going to call the endpoint that was generated by my Logic app, and I'm going to provide the information that an Azure Sentinel alert will normally provide. So you can see here that we have a user called Megan Bowens, and you have here in the entities my user name and my user UPN suffix. And a bit further, if you look in the extended links, this is where I can extract the Cloud App Security Alert ID, which is available here at the end of the URL. Let's click on the Send button, and this is going to run our playbook, and if all the conditions are met, it's going to automatically close the alert in Cloud App Security. Let's go back to the Azure portal, and this time I'm going to look at the executions. We can see that the execution was successful, so let's review what we had there. So you can see here the different information that we sent by simulating Sentinel with the IP address and the user details. We can see then that the user name was obtained by through the different operations. And if we look at the end, you can see that we're able to call Cloud App Security Alert and resolve the alert in Sentinel. If we pivot now to the Cloud App Security portal, we should have the alert resolved. So let's refresh the page. And you can see here that the alert has been resolved by my user. This concludes the video. Thanks a lot for your time. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to paste your question in the comments. Thanks and have a good day.